The fluorescent lights of Seattle General Hospital's emergency room buzzed with their usual harsh intensity as Dr. Emma Chen adjusted her thick-rimmed glasses for the 100th time that shift. Her dark hair was pulled back in a severe bun, not a strand out of place, despite the fact that she'd been on her feet for 14 hours straight. The oversized navy scrubs she wore hung loosely on her petite frame, making her appear even smaller than her 5'4" height. "Dr. Chen to Trauma Bay 3. Dr. Chen to Trauma Bay 3. The intercom crackled. Emma sighed, pushing her glasses up her nose as she grabbed the patient chart from the nurse's station. Another VIP case, apparently. She glanced at the name. Marcus Sterling, 34 years old, chest pains, possible cardiac episode. The address listed made her eyebrows rise slightly. Bellevue's most exclusive neighborhood. Of course, as she approached Trauma Bay 3, she could already hear the commotion. 2 nurses were bustling around, checking monitors, while a man in an expensive charcoal suit argued loudly with anyone who would listen. "I'm telling you, I'm fine," the voice boomed. "This is completely unnecessary. I have a board meeting in 2 hours, and I cannot miss it. Do you understand what that means? Millions of dollars are riding on—" Emma pushed through the curtain, her expression professionally neutral despite her growing irritation. "Mr. Sterling, I'm Dr. Chen. I'll be handling your case." She looked up from her chart to see a man who clearly belonged on the cover of a business magazine rather than a hospital gurney. Perfectly styled dark brown hair, sharp jawline, piercing blue eyes, and even lying down, he radiated the kind of confidence that came with having more money than most people could imagine. His designer suit was slightly rumpled, his tie loosened, but he still managed to look like he'd stepped out of a boardroom rather than an ambulance. Marcus Sterling stopped mid-sentence, his eyes focusing on the small woman in oversized scrubs who'd just entered. She looked impossibly young to be a doctor, and those enormous glasses dominated her face, making her dark eyes appear almost comically large behind the thick lenses. Her serious expression suggested she had zero patience for his protests. "Doctor," he said, his tone shifting to what Emma immediately recognized as his charming-the-room voice. "I appreciate your concern, but I assure you this is all a misunderstanding. I was having some minor chest discomfort after a particularly intense workout this morning. My assistant overreacted and called the paramedics. I feel perfectly fine now." Emma didn't look up from his chart as she replied, "Mr. Sterling, you're 34 years old, you work in a high-stress environment, and according to your initial assessment, your blood pressure is elevated, and your EKG shows some irregularities. Until I determine the cause, you're not going anywhere." "I beg your pardon." Marcus's voice carried the edge of someone who wasn't used to being told what to do. Now Emma did look up, her dark eyes meeting his through her thick lenses. "You heard me correctly. I understand you're accustomed to being in control, but in this hospital, in this room, I'm in charge. Your heart doesn't care about your net worth or your board meetings." A nurse nearby suppressed a smile as Marcus's mouth opened and closed like a fish out of water. It wasn't often someone spoke to Marcus Sterling that way. Emma moved efficiently around the bed, checking monitors and making notes. "When did the chest pain start?" she asked, all business. "Around 7 this morning, but scale of 1 to 10? Maybe a 5, but really, any family history of heart disease?" "My father had a heart attack at 55, but that's completely different." Emma finally stopped moving and fixed him with a stare that could have frozen hell. "Mr. Sterling, do you want to live to see 35? "Of course, but—" "Then stop talking and let me do my job." She turned to the nurse. "I need a complete metabolic panel, cardiac enzymes, and let's get him set up for an echocardiogram. Also, someone please take his phone away before he tries to conduct business while I'm trying to save his life." "You cannot take my phone," Marcus protested, instinctively clutching his iPhone. "I have responsibilities, people depending on me. I run a company worth $3.7 billion "And none of that will matter if you're dead," Emma interrupted, her voice sharp enough to cut glass. "Sarah, the phone, please." The nurse gently but firmly removed the device from Marcus's grip while he stared at Emma in shock. No one, absolutely no one, had ever dismissed his wealth and success so casually. Board members deferred to him. Employees scrambled to fulfill his every request. Even other doctors he'd encountered had been impressed by his status. But Dr. Emma Chen looked at him like he was just another patient who thought he knew better than his physician. "This is ridiculous," Marcus muttered, but there was less fight in his voice now. Emma continued her examination, her small hands surprisingly gentle as she checked his pulse points and listened to his heart. Despite his annoyance, Marcus found himself studying her face as she worked. She was completely focused, her brow slightly furrowed in concentration behind those enormous glasses. There was something oddly soothing about her competence, even if her bedside manner left something to be desired. "Your heart rate is still elevated," she said, stepping back and making another note. "Mr. Sterling, when was the last time you had a full physical?" Marcus shifted uncomfortably. "I don't really do doctors." "When?" Emma's voice brooked no argument. "Maybe 3 years ago? 4? Emma's pen stopped moving across the chart. She looked up at him with an expression that suggested she was reconsidering her career choice. 4 years? You're telling me that someone in your position with your stress levels and family history hasn't seen a doctor in 4 years? "I'm very healthy," Marcus said defensively. "I work out with a personal trainer 5 days a week. I eat clean. I take vitamins." "You also just had chest pains, severe enough that someone called an ambulance," Emma pointed out dryly. "Your definition of very healthy and mine seem to differ significantly." The test results came back faster than usual. Apparently being a billionaire did have some advantages, even if Emma Chen refused to acknowledge them. Marcus watched as she studied the papers, her expression growing more serious with each page. "Well?" he asked, when the silence stretched on too long. Emma removed her glasses to rub her eyes. She'd been staring at charts and monitors for hours. "Your cardiac enzymes are slightly elevated, which suggests your heart was under stress. Your cholesterol is borderline high, and your blood pressure indicates you're likely dealing with chronic stress. But I'm not having a heart attack." "No, not today. But Mr. Sterling, you're on a path that leads directly to one, probably sooner than you'd like." She looked up at him, and for the first time her expression held something that might have been concern rather than annoyance. "You need to make some serious lifestyle changes." Marcus felt a strange sense of relief wash over him. "So I can go?" "Absolutely not." Emma put her glasses back on and continued reading his results. "I'm admitting you for overnight observation. We need to do more comprehensive tests, and frankly, you need to be somewhere where you can't work for at least 12 hours. "That's impossible. I have a presentation to the board tomorrow morning that will determine whether we acquire a startup worth $200 million. I cannot miss it." Emma finally set down his chart and really looked at him. "Mr. Sterling, let me paint you a picture. You continue at your current pace, ignoring your health, pushing through chest pains, and prioritizing board meetings over medical care. In 6 months, maybe a year, you have a massive heart attack during one of those precious meetings. Your net worth won't matter much when you're in a coma, will it?" Marcus stared at her, struck by the bluntness of her words. Most people in his life told him what he wanted to hear. Even his doctors, the few he'd seen, had been diplomatic, suggesting minor adjustments rather than major changes. "You don't pull your punches, do you, Dr. Chen?" "I don't see the point in sugarcoating reality," Emma replied. "Your heart doesn't care about your feelings or your ego. It just wants to keep beating. My job is to make sure it can." For a moment, they looked at each other in silence. Marcus found himself oddly impressed by her complete indifference to his status. When was the last time someone had cared more about his well-being than his wealth? "Fine," he said finally. "One night, but I need to make some calls first." No calls until after the echocardiogram, Emma said firmly. And Mr. Sterling, when you do call your assistant, have them clear your schedule for the next few days. We're going to have a very serious conversation about your lifestyle choices. She turned to leave, but Marcus called after her. Dr. Chen? She paused, looking back over her shoulder. Thank you, he said. And for the first time since he'd arrived, his voice held no trace of arrogance or irritation. I know I'm not the easiest patient. Emma's expression softened slightly. Mr. Sterling, I've had patients try to perform surgery on themselves rather than admit they need help. You're difficult, but you're not impossible. As she walked away, Marcus found himself watching her retreating form with genuine curiosity. Dr. Emma Chen was unlike anyone he'd ever met, completely unimpressed by his success, unwilling to be charmed by his usual tactics, and apparently immune to the gravitational pull of his bank account. It was oddly refreshing and slightly terrifying. He settled back against the hospital pillows, already dreading the tests and conversations to come, but finding himself looking forward to seeing the no-nonsense Dr. Chen again. After all, it had been a very long time since anyone had surprised him. The next morning arrived grey and drizzly, typical Seattle weather that matched Marcus Sterling's mood as he stared at the hospital room ceiling. He'd slept terribly on the narrow bed, woken up 3 times by nurses checking his vitals, and his phone had been confiscated for over 16 hours. For a man who typically fielded dozens of calls before most people had their morning coffee, the silence was deafening. A sharp knock interrupted his brooding. Mr. Sterling, may I come in? Dr. Chen's voice. Marcus found himself sitting up straighter, running a hand through his disheveled hair. Of course. Emma entered carrying a thick file folder and what appeared to be his test results from the night before. This morning she'd traded her oversized scrubs for a white coat over dark slacks and a simple blue blouse. But those enormous glasses still dominated her face. Her hair was pulled back in the same severe bun, and she moved with the same efficient precision that had impressed him yesterday. "Good morning," she said, settling into the visitor's chair beside his bed. "How did you sleep?" "Like I was in a hospital," Marcus replied dryly. Emma's mouth twitched. Was that almost a smile? "Well, I have your test results, and we need to talk." She opened the folder and spread several papers across the rolling tray table. Marcus leaned forward, trying to make sense of the medical terminology and numbers. "The good news," Emma began, "is that you didn't have a heart attack, and there's no immediate evidence of significant coronary artery disease. The bad news is that your stress tests, blood work, and imaging all tell the same story." "You're a walking time bomb," Marcus frowned. "That seems a bit dramatic." "Does it?" Emma pulled out what looked like a printout from a heart monitor. "Your resting heart rate is consistently elevated. Your cortisol levels suggest chronic stress. Your blood pressure readings over the past 24 hours have been all over the map. And this," she pointed to another chart, "shows that during our conversation yesterday, your heart rate spiked to 130 beats per minute. You weren't exercising, Mr. Sterling. You were just talking to me. You were telling me I couldn't work," Marcus pointed out, "and your body responded as if you were being chased by a lion," Emma replied matter-of-factly. "That's not normal. That's your nervous system in constant fight-or-flight mode." Marcus stared at the papers, genuinely unsettled by the visual evidence of what his body had been trying to tell him. "So what are you saying? That work is killing me?" Emma leaned back in her chair, studying him with those dark eyes, magnified behind her thick lenses. "I'm saying that your relationship with work is killing you. There's a difference. I don't understand." "Tell me about a typical day," Emma said, pulling out a notepad. "Yesterday, before the chest pains. Walk me through it." Marcus thought back. "I was up at 5:30, checked emails and market reports. Conference call with our Tokyo office at 6:15, gym at 7, that's when the chest pain started actually. Showered, grabbed coffee and a protein bar, then meetings from 9 until about 2. working lunch with potential investors, more meetings until 6, then dinner with the head of acquisitions to discuss the Hartwell Industries deal. Emma was writing rapidly. When did you get home? Around 10:30. And then? Reviewed some documents, returned a few calls to the London office, caught up on emails. What time did you go to bed? Marcus hesitated. Maybe 1:30? Emma looked up from her notes. So you had 4 hours of sleep before starting the cycle again. It was a busy day. Mr. Sterling, when was the last time you had a day that wasn't busy? Marcus opened his mouth to answer, then closed it. He genuinely couldn't remember. Emma continued her questioning with the methodical precision of a detective. When did you last take a vacation? I went to Hawaii last year for a conference. A real vacation. No work, no calls, no emails. That's not really practical in my position. When did you last have a meal without discussing business? Marcus was beginning to feel like a defendant under cross-examination. Dr. Chen, I run a company with over 2,000 employees. The decisions I make affect thousands of people's livelihoods. I can't just disconnect. And if you're dead, Emma asked quietly, who benefits then? The question hung in the air between them. Marcus had built Sterling Technologies from a small software startup into a multi-billion-dollar empire, but he'd never seriously considered what would happen if he wasn't there to run it. Emma seemed to sense his discomfort and shifted gears. Tell me about your support system, family, friends, relationships. I have excellent employees, not work relationships, personal ones. Marcus found himself fidgeting with the hospital blanket. My parents live in Florida. I see them maybe twice a year. My sister lives in Portland with her family. Friends? Most of my social interactions are business-related. Are you seeing anyone? Dating? Marcus laughed, but there was no humor in it. When would I have time for that? Besides, most women I meet are either employees, which is inappropriate, or they're more interested in my bank account than in me. Emma made another note, and Marcus had the uncomfortable feeling she was cataloguing all the ways his life was falling apart. Mr. Sterling, she said finally, you're 34 years old. You're successful beyond most people's wildest dreams, and by all accounts you're completely miserable. I'm not miserable, Marcus protested, though even as he said it, he wondered if it was true. When was the last time you laughed? Really laughed, not just polite networking laughter. Marcus stared at her, completely stumped. Emma closed her notepad and leaned forward slightly. I'm going to be very direct with you, because sugarcoating this won't help anyone. Your current lifestyle is unsustainable. Your body is sending you warning signals. The chest pains, the elevated blood pressure, the stress responses. If you ignore them, the next signal might be a massive heart attack. So what are you suggesting? That I retire at 34? I'm suggesting that you learn the difference between working to live and living to work, Emma replied. You've built an incredible company, but you've forgotten to build a life to go with it. Marcus felt a surge of irritation. Easy for you to say. You're a doctor. You help people, save lives. Your work has meaning. I push numbers around and make rich people richer. Emma's eyebrows rose behind her glasses. Is that really what you think your company does? Isn't it? Mr. Sterling, I looked up Sterling Technologies last night. Your cybersecurity division has prevented dozens of data breaches that could have compromised millions of people's personal information. Your educational software has helped thousands of children with learning disabilities. Your clean energy initiatives have reduced carbon emissions equivalent to taking 50,000 cars off the road. Marcus stared at her in surprise. He'd been so focused on profit margins and market share that he'd forgotten about the actual impact of his work. The problem isn't your job, Emma continued. It's your approach to it. You're trying to do everything yourself, and that's not sustainable. It's also not necessary. I don't delegate well, Marcus admitted. Why? Because if something goes wrong, it reflects on me. The buck stops with me. Emma nodded thoughtfully. And if you have a heart attack during a board meeting? How does that reflect on you?" Before Marcus could answer, Emma's pager beeped loudly. She glanced at it and frowned. "I need to go. Emergency surgery," she said, standing quickly. "But we're not done with this conversation." She gathered her papers and headed for the door, then paused and turned back. "Mr. Sterling, I'm going to ask you to do something while I'm gone. I want you to think about what you'd regret most if you died tomorrow. Not business decisions or missed opportunities, personal regrets, things you never said, experiences you never had, relationships you never built." "Dr. Chen, just think about it," she said. And then she was gone, leaving Marcus alone with his thoughts and a growing sense of unease. He tried to focus on the question she'd posed, but found his mind wandering instead to Dr. Emma Chen herself. She was unlike anyone he'd ever encountered, completely immune to his usual charm, unimpressed by his wealth, but somehow still genuinely concerned about his well-being. She asked difficult questions and didn't accept easy answers. And despite her prickly bedside manner, there was something oddly comforting about having someone care enough to lecture him about his lifestyle choices. His phone buzzed on the bedside table. Apparently his communication privileges had been restored. The screen showed 17 missed calls and 43 unread messages. Marcus looked at it for a long moment, then did something he'd never done before. He turned it off. Instead, he lay back against the pillows and tried to think about Dr. Chen's question. What would he regret most if he died tomorrow? The answer that came to him was more unsettling than any medical test result. He'd regret never really living at all. 3 hours later, Marcus was still staring at the ceiling when he heard familiar footsteps approaching his room. Dr. Chen's efficient stride was becoming as recognizable as her no-nonsense voice. He found himself sitting up expectantly, realizing he'd been looking forward to her return more than he cared to admit. "Mr. Sterling?" Emma's voice carried a note of exhaustion as she knocked. "May I come in?" Of course. Emma entered, and Marcus immediately noticed the difference. Her usually pristine appearance was slightly disheveled. Her hair had escaped its tight bun in several places. There was a small stain on her white coat, and she looked utterly drained. She moved more slowly than usual, settling heavily into the visitor's chair. "Rough surgery?" Marcus asked, surprising himself with his concern. Emma rubbed her forehead with the back of her hand. 8-year-old boy, car accident. We managed to repair the damage to his heart, but—" She trailed off, shaking her head. "Sorry, you don't need to hear about this." "Actually, I'd like to hear about it," Marcus said quietly, "if you want to talk." Emma looked at him with surprise, as if she'd forgotten that patients could be interested in something other than their own conditions. "It's just, days like this remind me why I became a doctor, but also why it's so hard sometimes. That little boy's parents were terrified, and all I could think about was what if we couldn't save him? What if I made the wrong call?" Marcus studied her face, seeing vulnerability there for the first time since they'd met. "But you did save him. This time," Emma said softly. "But there's always a next time, and you never know when." She stopped abruptly, as if realizing she was revealing too much to a patient. Straightening in her chair, she reached for his chart. "How are you feeling? Any more chest pain?" "Dr. Chen," Marcus said gently, "when was the last time you took a break?" Emma paused in opening his file. "What do you mean?" "I mean, you've been working since yesterday morning. You just spent hours in surgery and you look exhausted. When did you last eat something? Sleep?" Emma stared at him as if he'd started speaking a foreign language. "Mr. Sterling, we're here to discuss your health, not mine." "Humor me," Marcus said. "You've spent the last day dissecting my lifestyle choices. I'm curious about yours. That's different. I'm a doctor. Long hours are part of the job. Just like long hours are part of being a CEO. Emma opened her mouth to argue, then closed it, apparently seeing the parallel he was drawing. "When did you last eat?" Marcus pressed. "I had coffee around 6 this morning." Marcus glanced at the wall clock. It was nearly 4 in the afternoon. "Dr. Chen, that's 10 hours ago." "I've been busy." And when did you sleep last? Emma hesitated. I got a few hours yesterday night. A few hours? Maybe 3. I had to check on some patients, and then there was the emergency surgery with the boy, and... Marcus leaned forward. So you've been working for over 30 hours, you've had 3 hours of sleep, and your last meal was a cup of coffee 10 hours ago. That's not unusual in this profession. And yet you're lecturing me about unsustainable lifestyle choices. Emma's cheeks flushed slightly behind her glasses. That's completely different. You don't have to work those hours. I do. People's lives depend on you being at your best, Marcus interrupted. How can you take care of others if you're not taking care of yourself? For a moment they stared at each other in silence. Then Emma let out a short, humorless laugh. Touché, Mr. Sterling. I suppose we're both hypocrites. Maybe we can help each other figure out a better way, Marcus suggested. Emma looked at him with genuine curiosity. What do you mean? I mean, maybe we both need to learn how to live healthier lives. You could teach me about stress management and work-life balance, and I could... well, I'm not sure what I could teach you, but we could figure it out together. The words hung in the air between them, and Marcus realized what he was suggesting sounded almost like a date? That wasn't what he'd meant, was it? Emma seemed to realize the same thing, because her professional demeanor snapped back into place. Mr. Sterling, I appreciate the sentiment, but doctor-patient relationships have very clear boundaries. My job is to treat you and discharge you with appropriate follow-up care. Nothing more. Of course, Marcus said quickly, though he felt oddly disappointed. I just meant... Emma's pager suddenly erupted in a series of sharp beeps. She glanced at it and immediately stood. I need to go. Another emergency. She moved toward the door with her characteristic efficiency, but in her exhaustion and haste, she walked directly into the partially open doorframe. The impact wasn't hard, but it was enough to send her thick glasses flying off her face and skittering across the linoleum floor. Oh no! Emma muttered, immediately dropping to her hands and knees to search for them. I can't see anything without those. Marcus watched in fascination as she felt around blindly on the floor, her hair finally coming completely loose from its bun and falling around her shoulders in soft, dark waves. Without the enormous glasses hiding her features, her face was completely transformed. She had the most beautiful eyes he'd ever seen, large and almond-shaped, with thick dark lashes that had been invisible behind the thick lenses. Her cheekbones were elegant and defined, her skin was flawless, and her lips were full and naturally pink. The severe bun that had pulled her features tight was gone, and the soft waves of her hair framed her face perfectly. She wasn't just pretty, she was absolutely stunning. Marcus sat frozen in his hospital bed, staring at this woman who had been hiding in plain sight behind unflattering glasses and severe styling. How was it possible that he hadn't seen it before? How had no one seen it? Found them, Emma said with relief, finally locating her glasses near the foot of his bed. She sat back on her heels and began to put them on, but paused when she noticed Marcus staring at her with an expression of complete shock. For a moment, their eyes met without the barrier of her thick lenses, and Marcus felt something shift inside his chest. Not the concerning cardiac episode from yesterday, but something entirely different and far more dangerous. Emma's cheeks flushed pink as she realized how she must look, hair disheveled, on her knees on the hospital floor, glasses in her hand instead of on her face. Self-consciousness washed over her as she saw Marcus's stunned expression. I'm sorry, she stammered, quickly jamming her glasses back on her face and scrambling to her feet. I must look terrible. I should go. She hurried toward the door, but Marcus found his voice just as she reached it. Dr. Chen, wait. Emma paused at the doorway but didn't turn around. Marcus could see the tension in her shoulders, the way she held herself as if bracing for something unpleasant. You don't look terrible, he said quietly. Emma's hand was on the door handle, her back still to him. Mr. Sterling, I really need to go. There's an emergency. Emma, he said, using her first name for the first time, his voice soft and sincere. "You're beautiful." Emma's entire body went rigid. Slowly, she turned around, and the expression on her face made Marcus's heart sink. Instead of pleasure or surprise, she looked mortified and angry. "Mr. Sterling," she said, her voice tight with controlled emotion, "I don't know what kind of game you're playing, but I'm not interested. I've heard every variation of the ugly duckling removes her glasses joke, and frankly, I expected better from you." "What?" "No, that's not—" "I have to go," Emma said firmly, and before Marcus could say another word, she was gone, leaving him staring at the empty doorway in complete confusion. What had just happened? He'd seen her without her glasses, been genuinely stunned by her beauty, tried to tell her so, and she'd acted like he'd insulted her. Did she think he was mocking her? Making fun of her appearance? Marcus replayed the conversation in his head, trying to understand where things had gone wrong. Her reaction suggested she'd experienced this kind of situation before, and not in a positive way. Someone, at some point, had made Emma Chen believe that compliments about her appearance were actually cruel jokes. The thought made Marcus angrier than he'd been in years. He reached for his phone, then stopped. What was he going to do, call her? She was his doctor, and she'd just made it very clear that she wanted to maintain professional boundaries. But as Marcus lay back against his pillows, staring at the spot where Emma had been kneeling on the floor, her dark hair catching the afternoon light streaming through the window, he knew one thing for certain. He had to see her again, and somehow he had to make her understand that when he'd called her beautiful, he'd meant every word. 24 hours later, Marcus Sterling was officially discharged from Seattle General Hospital, but he felt no relief as he signed the final paperwork. A different doctor, Dr. Harrison, a pleasant man in his 50s, had handled his discharge, explaining that Dr. Chen was covering the emergency department and unavailable. Marcus had asked 3 times if he could speak with her before leaving. Each time, Dr. Harrison had politely explained that Dr. Chen was extremely busy and had left detailed instructions for his follow-up care. The message was clear. Emma was avoiding him. Now Marcus sat in the back of his Tesla, being driven to his penthouse apartment in downtown Seattle, staring out at the city skyline without really seeing it. His assistant, Jennifer, sat beside him scrolling through her tablet and updating him on everything he'd missed during his hospital stay. "The Hartwell Industries presentation has been rescheduled for Thursday," Jennifer was saying. "I moved your meeting with the Japanese investors to Friday morning, and the board has agreed to delay the quarterly review until next week. Oh, and your doctor's office called to confirm your follow-up appointment on Wednesday." Marcus's attention snapped back to the present. Which doctor's office? Jennifer consulted her tablet. Dr. Patrick Harrison at Seattle General. Something about lifestyle management and stress reduction. Marcus felt his stomach sink. Not Emma. Of course not Emma. "Jennifer," he said carefully, "I need you to do something for me." "Of course, Mr. Sterling. I need you to find out everything you can about Dr. Emma Chen at Seattle General. Her schedule, her background, her interests. Anything that might help me understand why she—" He paused, realizing how this might sound. "It's for a personal matter." Jennifer raised an eyebrow, but nodded professionally. "I'll see what I can find." Meanwhile, 3 floors underground in Seattle General's cafeteria, Emma Chen sat alone at a corner table, mechanically eating a salad while trying to concentrate on a medical journal. She'd been avoiding the cardiology ward all day, switching shifts with other doctors and volunteering for emergency cases to ensure she wouldn't accidentally run into Marcus Sterling before his discharge. The encounter in his room kept replaying in her mind, and each time she thought about it, she felt a fresh wave of embarrassment and anger. She'd actually started to like him, found his concern for her well-being touching, appreciated his intelligence and his willingness to examine his own flaws. For a brief moment, she'd even entertained the ridiculous notion that they might become friends. And then, she'd made a fool of herself, literally falling at his feet, and he'd seen her without her carefully constructed armor of oversized glasses and severe styling. The worst part wasn't that he'd seen her. It was that for just a split second, when their eyes had met across the hospital room, she'd thought she'd seen genuine admiration there, maybe even attraction, which made his mocking, "You're beautiful" comment even more cruel. Emma had heard it all before. In high school, when popular kids had dared each other to ask the nerdy girl to prom as a joke. In college, when fraternity boys had made bets about who could get the bookworm to take off her glasses. In medical school, when competitive classmates had used fake compliments to throw her off her game before important exams. She'd learned to build walls for a reason. "Dr. Chen?" A familiar voice interrupted her brooding. Emma looked up to see Dr. Sarah Martinez, one of the emergency department nurses, approaching with her lunch tray. Sarah was everything Emma was not: outgoing, bubbly, effortlessly stylish, and possessing the kind of natural beauty that turned heads wherever she went. "Mind if I sit?" Sarah asked. "You look like you could use some company." Emma gestured to the empty chair across from her. "Rough shift?" "Not as rough as yours, apparently," Sarah said, settling into her seat. "I heard about yesterday's celebrity patient, Marcus Sterling, right? How was that?" Emma tried to keep her expression neutral. "He was challenging." Sarah laughed. "I bet. I looked him up after I heard he was here. That man is seriously gorgeous. Please tell me you at least noticed." "I was focused on his medical needs," Emma replied stiffly. "Come on, Emma. You're a doctor, not a robot. Even you must have noticed that he's basically every woman's fantasy, rich, successful, and built like a movie star." Emma took a bite of her salad, chewing carefully before responding. "Wealth and physical appearance are irrelevant to patient care." Sarah studied her friend's face with growing concern. "Okay, what happened? You've got that look you get when someone's been an ass to you." "Nothing happened. He was discharged this morning and I'll never see him again. End of story." "Emma," Sarah's voice was gentle but firm, "talk to me." Emma set down her fork and rubbed her temples, feeling a headache building behind her eyes. "It's stupid. Try me. He saw me without my glasses yesterday. I walked into a doorframe because I was distracted, and they went flying. And when I found them and looked up, he had this expression on his face like—" Emma paused, struggling to find the words. "Like what?" "Like he was shocked. Disgusted, maybe. And then he said I was beautiful, but not in a nice way. In that fake way people use when they're making fun of you." Sarah frowned. "Are you sure that's what happened?" "Of course I'm sure. I know the difference between a genuine compliment and mockery." "Emma, honey, have you considered that maybe he really was surprised by how you look? And not in a bad way?" Emma shook her head firmly. "You don't understand. Men like Marcus Sterling don't look at women like me and see beauty. They see the smart girl who does their homework, or the doctor who fixes their problems, but they don't see someone they'd actually want to be with." "That's not true." "Yes, it is." Emma's voice was quiet, but certain. "And that's okay. I've made peace with it. I'm good at my job, I help people, and that's enough, but I don't need anyone pretending otherwise just to amuse themselves." Sarah reached across the table and squeezed Emma's hand. "For what it's worth, I think you're selling yourself short. And maybe you're selling him short too." Before Emma could respond, her pager buzzed urgently. She glanced at it and sighed. "Multi-car accident coming in. I have to go." "Emma," Sarah called as she stood to leave, "promise me you'll think about what I said?" Emma nodded absently, already shifting into work mode, but she had no intention of thinking about Marcus Sterling any more than necessary. Meanwhile, across town in his penthouse office, Marcus was having the most unproductive day of his career. He'd been staring at the same contract for 2 hours without absorbing a single word. Every time he tried to focus on work, his mind wandered back to the look on Emma's face when she'd left his hospital room. He'd hurt her somehow, and he couldn't figure out how or why. His intercom buzzed. "Mr. Sterling? I have that information you requested about Dr. Chen." Marcus straightened in his chair. "Come in." Jennifer entered with a file folder and her ever-present tablet. "Doctor." Emma Chen, 31 years old, graduated magna cum laude from Harvard Medical School, completed her residency at Johns Hopkins, and has been at Seattle General for 3 years. She's considered one of the best cardiac surgeons on the West Coast, despite her age. What about her personal life? That's where it gets interesting, Jennifer said, consulting her notes. She has no social media presence that I could find. No public relationships or dating history. She volunteers at a free clinic in the International District on weekends, and she's published several papers on pediatric cardiac surgery. Marcus absorbed this information, trying to piece together a picture of Emma Chen outside the hospital. Anything else? I spoke with a friend who works in hospital administration. According to her, Dr. Chen is known for being brilliant, but incredibly private. She doesn't socialize with other staff, rarely attends hospital events, and is completely focused on her work. Sounds familiar, Marcus murmured. Sir? Marcus looked up. Did your friend mention anything about Dr. Chen's appearance? How she presents herself? Jennifer looked puzzled by the question. Only that she's very professional, always appropriate, never draws attention to herself. Why do you ask? Marcus stood and walked to the floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking Elliott Bay. I think I may have inadvertently offended her yesterday, and I'm trying to understand why. What did you do? I told her she was beautiful. Jennifer blinked in surprise. And that offended her? Apparently. Marcus turned back to face his assistant. Jennifer, if someone you'd just met told you that you were beautiful, how would you react? Well, that would depend on the context and how they said it, and whether I believed they were being sincere. What if you didn't believe they were being sincere? Understanding dawned on Jennifer's face. Oh, you think she thought you were making fun of her? That's the only explanation that makes sense. But I don't understand why she would think that. Jennifer was quiet for a moment, then said carefully, Mr. Sterling, may I speak freely? Of course. You're a very powerful, very wealthy man. You're used to getting what you want when you want it. Dr. Chen probably doesn't have much experience with men in your position, and she might be suspicious of your motives. Marcus considered this. You think she assumes I'm not genuine? I think she might be protecting herself, Jennifer said gently. Some women learn to be cautious about compliments from men, especially men who seem out of their league. Out of her league? Marcus was genuinely shocked. Jennifer, Dr. Chen is brilliant, accomplished, dedicated to helping people. She saves lives for a living. How could she possibly think she's out of anyone's league? Jennifer smiled softly. Because sometimes the most accomplished women are the ones who doubt themselves the most, especially when it comes to their appearance. Marcus sank back into his chair, finally beginning to understand the magnitude of his mistake. Emma hadn't rejected his compliment because she was rude or unprofessional. She'd rejected it because she didn't believe it was real. And if Jennifer was right, that meant Emma Chen had been hurt before, possibly many times. The thought made Marcus's chest tighten with something that felt suspiciously like protectiveness. Jennifer, he said quietly, I need to fix this. What do you have in mind? Marcus was quiet for a long moment, staring out at the Seattle skyline. Then, slowly, a plan began to form. I'm going to show her that I was sincere, but I need to do it in a way that doesn't make her feel cornered or uncomfortable. How? Marcus turned back to his assistant with the first genuine smile he'd worn in days. I'm going to become the kind of patient she can't ignore. 2 weeks after his discharge, Marcus Sterling found himself doing something he'd never done before, deliberately trying to become a patient. It was proving more challenging than acquiring a $200 million company. Mr. Sterling, Dr. Harrison said during Marcus's follow-up appointment, your blood pressure is excellent. Your stress levels appear to be much improved, and frankly, you look better than you have in years. Whatever lifestyle changes you've implemented are working beautifully. Marcus shifted uncomfortably in the examination chair. He'd been hoping for something, anything, that might require Dr. Chen's expertise. But don't you think I should have a cardiac stress test, just to be safe? We did one last week. It was perfect. What about a consultation with a cardiac surgeon? For preventative purposes. Dr. Harrison looked at him with growing suspicion. Mr. Sterling, is there something specific that's concerning you? Some symptoms you haven't mentioned? Marcus hesitated. He could hardly explain that he was desperately trying to engineer a reason to see Emma Chen again. I just want to be thorough. Well, I suppose I could arrange a consultation if you're really concerned, Dr. Harrison said slowly. Though I should mention that Dr. Chen is quite busy these days. She's been covering extra shifts in the emergency department. Marcus's heart rate spiked, not from cardiac distress, but from the mention of Emma's name. Dr. Chen would be perfect. I'll see what I can do. Meanwhile, 3 floors down in the hospital cafeteria, Emma was having lunch with Sarah when her phone buzzed with a text from the scheduling department. Cardiac consultation requested for Marcus Sterling Thursday at 2 p.m. Patient specifically requested you. Confirm availability. Emma stared at the message, her sandwich forgotten. Everything okay? Sarah asked, noticing Emma's expression. He wants another consultation, Emma said quietly. Who? Marcus Sterling. He's been discharged for 2 weeks, and now he wants to see me again. Sarah raised an eyebrow. Maybe he has legitimate medical concerns. His follow-up reports have been excellent. Dr. Harrison said he's never seen such rapid improvement in stress-related symptoms. Then why would he want to see you? Emma's jaw tightened. I think he's amusing himself. Rich guy gets bored, decides to mess with the doctor who wasn't impressed by his money. Or, Sarah said gently, maybe he genuinely wants to apologize for whatever happened between you two. Emma shook her head. Men like Marcus Sterling don't apologize to women like me. They just find new ways to entertain themselves. But even as she said it, Emma found herself thinking about their conversations in his hospital room. He'd seemed genuinely interested in her perspectives on his lifestyle, had shown real concern for her well-being. Could Sarah be right? She typed back a response. Available Thursday at 2 p.m. Professional consultation only. Thursday afternoon arrived with Seattle's typical autumn drizzle. Marcus had changed his outfit 3 times, finally settling on dark jeans and a navy sweater, casual enough to seem approachable, but not so casual as to appear disrespectful of the hospital environment. He arrived at Seattle General 30 minutes early and spent the time pacing the lobby, rehearsing what he wanted to say. He'd brought backup, a peace offering that he hoped might demonstrate his sincerity. At exactly 2 o'clock, Marcus knocked on the door of consultation room 3. "Come in," came Emma's familiar voice. Marcus entered to find Emma sitting behind a small desk, her thick glasses firmly in place, her hair pulled back in its usual severe bun. She wore a white coat over dark slacks and a professional blue blouse, and her expression was completely neutral. "Mr. Sterling," she said without looking up from his file, "please have a seat. Dr. Harrison indicated you had some concerns about your cardiac health." Marcus sat in the chair across from her desk, noting the careful distance she'd maintained between them. "Dr. Chen, I wanted to—" "Let's start with your symptoms," Emma interrupted, her tone briskly professional. "Are you experiencing any chest pain, shortness of breath, or irregular heartbeat?" "No, but any changes in your exercise tolerance? Fatigue during normal activities?" "Emma, please, I need to—" "Dr. Chen," she corrected sharply, finally looking up at him. "And I need you to answer my questions so I can properly assess your condition." Marcus realized she was deliberately keeping things clinical, refusing to allow any personal conversation. He decided to play along, hoping for an opening. "No symptoms," he said. "My energy levels are actually better than they've been in years." Emma made a note in his file. "And your sleep patterns?" "Improved. I've been getting 7 to 8 hours most nights." Another note. "Stress levels? Much better. I've been delegating more at work, taking actual lunch breaks." Emma's pen paused slightly. "That's good to hear. I've also been thinking about what you said, about the difference between working to live and living to work." Emma's expression remained carefully neutral, but Marcus caught a flicker of interest in her eyes before she looked back down at his file. "Exercise routine?" she asked. "3 times a week instead of 5. Less intense. I hired a yoga instructor." This time Emma did look up, surprise clearly written on her face before she caught herself. "Yoga? Your point about stress management resonated with me. I figured I should try something that focused on both physical and mental health." Emma studied his face as if trying to determine whether he was being sincere. "That's actually very wise. I had a good teacher," Marcus said quietly. The silence stretched between them, and Marcus sensed this might be his only chance. "Dr. Chen, I know you're busy, but I brought something for you." He reached into the bag he'd carried in and pulled out a book. "I remembered you mentioning your interest in pediatric cardiac surgery." Emma's eyes widened as she saw the title, "Advanced Pediatric Cardiac Interventions" by Dr. Michael Harrison, the leading authority in the field. "It's a first edition," Marcus said. "Signed by the author. I thought you might find it useful." Emma stared at the book without touching it. "Mr. Sterling, I can't accept gifts from patients." "It's not a gift," Marcus said quickly. "Consider it a donation to the hospital library. I just thought you might want to read it first." Emma finally reached for the book, opening it carefully to the title page. There, in elegant handwriting, was an inscription. "To Dr. Emma Chen, a brilliant surgeon whose dedication to her patients is an inspiration. Best wishes, Michael Harrison." Emma looked up at Marcus in shock. "How did you—" "Dr. Harrison doesn't just sign books for random people." Marcus shifted uncomfortably. "I may have mentioned that I knew a surgeon at Seattle General who was doing innovative work in pediatric cardiac care. He was quite interested to hear about your research." "You told him about my research?" "I looked up your published papers after I was discharged. The one about minimally invasive techniques for infant heart defects was remarkable." Dr. Harrison agreed. Emma stared at him, clearly struggling to process this information. "You read my research papers?" "All of them. Twice, actually. I had to look up a lot of medical terminology the first time through." For a long moment, Emma was speechless. Then her professional mask slipped back into place. "That was thoughtful, but unnecessary." Marcus leaned forward slightly. "Doctor, Jen, I need to apologize for what happened in my hospital room. I think there was a misunderstanding." "There's nothing to apologize for," Emma said quickly, closing the book and setting it aside. "You were discharged with clear instructions for follow-up care. Since you're not experiencing any symptoms, I see no reason for additional consultations." She stood, clearly intending to end the appointment, but Marcus remained seated. "Emma, please, just let me explain." "Dr. Chen," she corrected again, but there was less sharpness in her voice this time. "Dr. Chen, then. When I saw you without your glasses that day, when I told you that you were beautiful, I wasn't mocking you. I was stunned in the best possible way." Emma's face went pale. "Mr. Sterling, please don't. I know you think I was making fun of you, but I wasn't. I would never do that. The truth is, I couldn't stop thinking about you after you left that room, not just because of how you looked, but because of who you are." Emma's hands were gripping the edge of the desk so tightly, her knuckles were white. "Stop. You're brilliant and dedicated, and you care about people in a way that's rare in this world. You saw right through all my defenses and called me out on behavior that was slowly killing me. You probably saved my life. Mr. Sterling, and yes, you're also incredibly beautiful, not just without your glasses, but with them too. The way you focus when you're thinking, the way you tilt your head when you're listening, the way you get this little line between your eyebrows when you're concerned about a patient." "Stop!" Emma's voice was sharp enough to cut glass. "Just stop!" She moved toward the door, but Marcus stood and gently caught her arm. "Emma, why won't you believe me?" And as she turned to face him, and Marcus was shocked to see tears in her eyes behind her thick glasses. "Because men like you don't see women like me," she said quietly. "Not really. You see the smart girl who can solve your problems, or the doctor who can fix your health issues, but you don't see someone you'd actually want to be with. And that's fine. I've accepted that. But I don't need you to pretend otherwise. Marcus felt his heart break a little at the pain in her voice. Emma, that's not true. Isn't it? She pulled her arm free. Tell me honestly, Mr. Sterling, if you'd met me at a restaurant or a bar, if I'd just been some woman wearing thick glasses and a conservative outfit, would you have looked twice? Marcus opened his mouth to answer, then stopped. The honest truth was that he probably wouldn't have. Not because Emma wasn't beautiful, but because he'd been so focused on work and status that he'd stopped seeing people clearly. Emma saw his hesitation and nodded sadly. That's what I thought. You're right, Marcus said quietly. 6 months ago, I probably wouldn't have seen you. But not because you're not worth seeing, because I was too blind and shallow to recognize something real when it was right in front of me. Emma's expression softened slightly, but she shook her head. Mr. Sterling, I think it's best if we don't see each other again, unless you have a genuine medical emergency, of course. She opened the door, clearly expecting him to leave, but Marcus had one more card to play. Dr. Chen, would you do me one favor? Emma paused but didn't turn around. What? Seattle General is having a charity gala next weekend. I bought a table, partially as a donation, but also because I was hoping you might attend as my guest. Emma turned around, her expression incredulous. You want me to go to a gala with you? I want to prove to you that my feelings are genuine. Give me one evening to show you that I see you, really see you. And if you still think I'm not sincere, I'll never bother you again. Emma stared at him for a long moment. Mr. Sterling, Marcus, he said softly. My name is Marcus. Marcus, she said carefully. This is a terrible idea. Probably, he agreed. But would you consider it anyway? Emma was quiet for so long that Marcus thought she was going to refuse. Then, so quietly he almost missed it, she said, I don't have anything appropriate to wear to a gala. Marcus felt a surge of hope. Is that a yes? Emma looked at him with an expression he couldn't quite read. That's a maybe. If I agree to this insane idea, it would be as colleagues, nothing more. Colleagues, Marcus agreed, though his smile suggested he was hoping for much more than that. Emma sighed, clearly questioning her own judgment. The gala is Saturday night. 7 o'clock. I could pick you up. I'll meet you there, Emma said quickly. And Marcus, yes, if this is some elaborate joke, if you're planning to humiliate me in front of the entire Seattle medical community, I will make sure you never set foot in this hospital again. Marcus looked into her eyes with complete seriousness. Emma, I give you my word, I would never hurt you like that. Emma nodded slowly, then stepped back into the hallway. I'll see you Saturday night. As she walked away, Marcus remained in the consultation room, hardly able to believe she'd said yes. He had 4 days to plan the perfect evening, one that would convince Dr. Emma Chen that when he looked at her, he saw everything he'd been searching for without even knowing it. And somewhere in the back of his mind, a voice whispered that this gala might change both their lives forever. Saturday evening arrived with an unexpected break in Seattle's autumn rain. The Four Seasons Hotel ballroom was transformed into an elegant wonderland for Seattle General Hospital's annual charity gala, with crystal chandeliers casting warm light over tables draped in ivory linens and centerpieces of white roses. Marcus Sterling stood near the entrance, adjusting his black tie for the 10th time in 5 minutes. He'd arrived 30 minutes early, unable to concentrate on anything else all day. What if Emma changed her mind? What if she didn't show up? What if she did show up but spent the entire evening convinced he was playing some elaborate prank? At 7:15, just as Marcus was beginning to seriously worry, he saw a familiar figure hesitating near the ballroom entrance. But it took him a moment to recognize her. Dr. Emma Chen stood uncertainly at the threshold, and Marcus felt his breath catch in his throat. She'd traded her usual severe bun for soft waves that fell just past her shoulders, framing her face beautifully. Instead of her thick-rimmed glasses, she wore delicate contacts that revealed her stunning dark eyes. The navy blue dress she'd chosen was elegant and understated, not too formal, not too casual, with a classic cut that highlighted her graceful figure without being overly revealing. She looked absolutely radiant. But more than her appearance, it was her expression that made Marcus's heart ache. She looked terrified. Emma stood frozen at the entrance, scanning the crowd of Seattle's medical and social elite. Everyone looked so polished, so confident, so at ease in this world of wealth and glamour. She felt like an imposter who'd wandered into the wrong event. Maybe this had been a mistake. Maybe she should leave before anyone noticed her. Emma. She turned to find Marcus approaching, and the genuine warmth in his smile made some of her anxiety ease. He looked impossibly handsome in his perfectly tailored tuxedo, but more importantly, he looked genuinely happy to see her. "You came," he said softly. "I said I would," Emma replied, surprised by how steady her voice sounded. "You look—" Marcus paused, remembering how badly his last compliment had been received. "You look lovely, but then, you always do." Emma felt heat rise in her cheeks. "Thank you. You clean up pretty well yourself." Marcus laughed, the sound warm and genuine. "Shall we?" He offered her his arm. Emma hesitated for just a moment, then slipped her hand through his elbow. The gesture felt surprisingly natural. Marcus led her toward their table, which was positioned with a perfect view of the stage, but far enough from the kitchen doors to avoid the bustle of service. As they walked, Emma was acutely aware of the curious glances they were attracting. "Everyone's staring," she murmured. "They're staring because you're beautiful," Marcus said quietly. "And because I'm the luckiest man in the room tonight." Emma shot him a sideways look. "You don't have to say things like that." "I know I don't have to. I want to." They reached their table, where Marcus had strategically seated them with Dr. Sarah Martinez and her husband, along with a few other medical professionals Emma knew and respected. Sarah's face lit up when she saw them approach. "Emma, you look absolutely stunning," Sarah exclaimed, standing to embrace her friend. "And Mr. Sterling, thank you for the invitation to join your table. Please call me Marcus, and thank you for coming. Emma mentioned you were friends, and I thought she might be more comfortable with familiar faces around." Emma looked at him in surprise. He'd thought about her comfort level and planned accordingly. As they settled into their seats, Emma found herself relaxing despite her initial nervousness. Marcus was an excellent host, attentive without being overwhelming, including her in conversations, and clearly making an effort to put everyone at ease. When Dr. Peterson, the chief of surgery, stopped by their table, Marcus stood respectfully and listened with genuine interest as the older man discussed the hospital's new pediatric wing. "Dr. Chen has been instrumental in developing our pediatric cardiac program," Dr. Peterson was saying. "Her research on minimally invasive techniques has been groundbreaking." "I've read some of her work," Marcus said, glancing at Emma with obvious pride. "It's remarkable." Emma felt a flutter of something warm in her chest. He really had read her research papers. As dinner was served, Marcus found himself marveling at how comfortable this felt. Emma had a sharp wit that came out in small, dry observations about the evening's speakers and the hospital politics at play. She was knowledgeable about art, literature, and music, but wore her intelligence lightly, never trying to impress or dominate the conversation. "The silent auction has some interesting pieces this year," Sarah mentioned as they finished their main course. "Emma, you should bid on that weekend at the San Juan Islands bed and breakfast. You never take vacations." "I don't really do vacations," Emma said automatically. "Neither did I," Marcus said quietly, "until recently, when someone convinced me that maybe there was more to life than work." Emma met his eyes across the table, and something passed between them, an acknowledgement of how much they both had changed since that first day in the hospital. The evening's program began with speeches from hospital administrators and major donors. When Marcus was introduced as one of the evening's platinum sponsors, he stood to acknowledge the applause, but kept his remarks brief and focused on the hospital's mission rather than his own contributions. "He's not what I expected," Sarah whispered to Emma during the applause. "What do you mean?" "He's not trying to impress anyone. He seems more interested in making sure you're having a good time than in networking or showing off his wealth." Emma glanced at Marcus, who was listening intently to a presentation about the hospital's outreach programs. Sarah was right. He seemed genuinely engaged with the cause, not just treating this as a social obligation. As the formal program concluded and the band began playing for dancing, Marcus turned to Emma with a slightly nervous expression. "Would you like to dance?" Emma felt her stomach flutter. "I'm not really much of a dancer." "Neither am I, honestly, but I was hoping you might suffer through it with me anyway." Despite her nervousness, Emma found herself nodding. Marcus led her to the dance floor, where couples were swaying to a classic jazz standard. He placed one hand gently on her waist and took her hand in his, maintaining a respectful distance. "See? This isn't so bad," Marcus said as they began to move together. Emma had to admit he was right. He was a better dancer than he'd claimed, leading her confidently but never making her feel clumsy or out of place. "Marcus," she said, after they'd danced in comfortable silence for a few minutes. "Yes? Why did you really ask me here tonight?" Marcus was quiet for a moment, considering his answer. "Because I wanted to spend time with you outside the hospital. Because I wanted to show you that my interest in you isn't some passing whim or cruel joke. And because—" He paused, meeting her eyes. "Because I can't stop thinking about you." Emma felt her heart skip a beat. "Marcus, I know you don't believe me yet. I know you think this is all some elaborate game, but Emma, in the past month you've changed everything about how I see the world. You made me realize that I was so focused on building a successful company that I'd forgotten to build a life worth living." The song was ending, but neither of them moved to leave the dance floor. "I've been thinking about what you asked me in the hospital room," Marcus continued, "about what I'd regret most if I died tomorrow. And I realized the answer isn't business deals or missed opportunities. It's that I'd regret never telling you how I feel about you." Emma's breath caught. "How do you feel about me?" Marcus's hand tightened slightly on her waist. "I'm falling in love with you, Emma. Maybe I already have fallen in love with you. With your brilliant mind, your dedication to your patients, your complete inability to be impressed by anything that doesn't matter. With the way you see right through all the superficial stuff and focus on what's real." Emma stared at him, her heart racing. "You barely know me. I know that you work extra shifts to cover for colleagues who need time with their families, even though you never ask for the same consideration. I know that you volunteer at a free clinic on weekends because you believe healthcare should be available to everyone. I know that you chose pediatric cardiac surgery because you can't stand the thought of children suffering." Emma's eyes widened. "How do you know all that?" "Because I wanted to understand you, the real you, not just the professional facade you show the world." Marcus's voice was soft but intense. "And the more I learned, the more I realized that you're exactly the kind of person I want in my life." "Marcus, this is crazy. We're from completely different worlds." "Are we?" "We're both workaholics who use our careers to avoid dealing with personal relationships. We're both afraid of letting people get too close. We're both convinced that we have to handle everything ourselves." Emma couldn't argue with that assessment. "The difference is," Marcus continued, "you chose a career that helps people, while I chose one that just made me rich. You have purpose, Emma. You have meaning in your life. Being around you makes me want to find that too." A new song had started, but they remained standing close together on the edge of the dance floor, lost in their conversation. "What are you saying?" Emma asked quietly. "I'm saying that maybe we could help each other figure out how to have both, meaningful work and a real life. Maybe we could learn together how to let someone else in." Emma searched his face, looking for any sign of insincerity, All she saw was hope and vulnerability that matched her own. "I'm scared," she admitted. "So am I," Marcus said. "I've never felt this way about anyone before, and I have no idea what I'm doing. But Emma, I'd rather figure it out with you than spend the rest of my life wondering what might have been." Emma was quiet for a long moment, her mind racing. Everything rational told her this was a terrible idea. They barely knew each other, they came from different backgrounds, and her track record with relationships was virtually non-existent. But standing here with Marcus, looking into his eyes and seeing genuine emotion there, she realized that maybe rational wasn't always right. "Okay," she said finally. Marcus blinked. "Okay? Okay, let's try this, whatever this is. But slowly, Marcus. I need to take this slowly." The smile that spread across Marcus's face was brighter than all the crystal chandeliers in the ballroom. "As slowly as you want. We have all the time in the world. And if this doesn't work out, then we'll deal with that if it happens. But Emma, I have a feeling this is going to work out better than either of us can imagine." As if on cue, the band began playing a slower song, and Marcus raised an eyebrow in question. Emma smiled, a real, genuine smile that transformed her entire face, and stepped back into his arms. As they swayed together on the dance floor, surrounded by Seattle's elite but focused only on each other, Emma allowed herself to believe that maybe, just maybe, she deserved this kind of happiness. "Marcus," she said softly. "Tidurigi, when I take my contacts out tonight and put my glasses back on, are you still going to look at me the same way?" Marcus pulled back slightly so he could meet her eyes. "Emma, I'm going to look at you like you're the most beautiful woman in the world every single day for the rest of my life, glasses or no glasses, because that's exactly what you are." "No." And as Marcus leaned down to kiss her for the first time, right there on the dance floor of the Four Seasons ballroom, Emma Chen finally believed him. 6 months later, Dr. Emma Chen was reviewing patient charts in her office when her assistant knocked on the door. "Dr. Chen, there's a delivery for you." Emma looked up to see a massive bouquet of white roses, the same roses that had decorated their table at the charity gala. The card read, "To the woman who taught me the difference between success and happiness. Thank you for taking a chance on us. All my love, Marcus. P.S. Dinner tonight, I promise to turn off my phone." Emma smiled, pushing her glasses up her nose as she reached for her phone to text him back. "Only if you promise to let me cook." And Marcus, "Yes, I love you too." As she hit send, Emma caught her reflection in her office window. Glasses firmly in place, hair in its practical bun, wearing her favorite scrubs. She looked exactly like herself, and for the first time in her life, that felt like more than enough. It felt perfect.